So we'll get to the good mixed news with George and Duncan Egg, but also a report on the Continental, which is coming rapidly to us in the fall. But let's deal with the Duncan Egg scoop, which is that now Duncan Egg, for those who don't know, these are a series of books that George has written beyond the main series of A Song of Ice and Fire. It deals with, as I've just stated, Duncan Egg and their travels and their adventures. There's about 3 books, I believe. I've only skimmed the books. I've not read them fully. I've actually also skimmed the graphic novels. So the comic books were very well illustrated. So I'd recommend those. From what I read and saw, they were really incredible. So the stories are fine. I'd have to read up on them to judge them finally as really good books. They are being given the official green light with HBO, or Max, as it's now going to be called. What does that mean? Well, it means that something will be done. They've moved past the stage of pitching it. They are developing this actively as a TV show that will come to us. That does not mean we will get it. It does not mean they will even make it. There are, of course, things with the Game of Thrones universe they've actually made, like the Naomi Watts series, for people who remember, and her thing was not released, even though they made it. They've actually have it in the vaults, but they're not going to release it. So even if they actually make the whole thing, they may not release it. So they may cast it, film it, write it, but nothing will actually happen. So you want to not oversell this thing. This is just going to move forward. They're not moving forward with Nymeria, which I'm very disappointed with. Jon Snow apparently will still go forward, but we haven't heard an update so far. But that may change. Things are moving with Jon Snow actively. Things will now move forward with Duncan Egg, but many other things will not move forward, and that's a little disappointing. As you can tell from my tone of voice, I'm not that interested in Duncan Egg. I don't hate the stories, I just don't particularly care, but I will give more of a personal opinion, but let me deal with the Continental. So a teaser has been released for the Continental, and the teaser looks good. It looks really interesting, and it's very violent, so it promises very good things. However, I don't feel I'm as excited as I should be. Essentially, the Continental will follow young Winston. So this is a prequel series before the John Wick series. So we're not going to see John Wick unless we're going to see a very young version of him, and they have not promised that. It has a lot of good characters and a lot of really interesting actors, but it's being set up as a 3-part series. So that tells me one of 2 things. Either the actors they've hired will only do cameos, and or a lot of people are going to get killed off, because there's no way they're going to fit in all those characters within 3 parts. That's just way too many people. Plus it's going to be a complete mess. So I'm a little bit hesitant what they're doing with Continental. It does look good. It's very stylish. However, tonally, it looks very different from the John Wick series, and usually I'm okay with that. But I'm a little scared where they may go with this. So at this point, I'm actually more excited for the Ballerina Project, or whatever they're going to call it, which is in between John Wick 3 and 4. So the Continental looks promising, but I'm a little nervous. And that gets us back to Duncan Egg. So what is the good and what is the bad? Well, Duncan Egg, canonically, if they are going to follow the books, is in between House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. That's the timeline. Now, they're not saying they're going to be faithful, and the people on here do look good. They've got Ira Parker, who wrote for Hot D, and they've got Ryan Condal, who did the producing job for House of the Dragon. So they have some good people working on it, but they've not really specified, is this even going to be a faithful adaptation? Is it even going to be about Duncan Egg, or is it going to have new characters, side characters? But let's not, I think, put off the real controversy, which is some reports, and I want to be careful, these are reports, it may not happen, that George is going to be a writer for Duncan Egg. And I think that's not a good idea. Now, with House of the Dragon, I think him doing at least one of the episodes would have been fine. Him doing the first episode, from my understanding, he is editing Winds. He's still, of course, working on it. There may be a few more pages. Again, for George, that means maybe 100, 200 pages. Pretty sure it's going to happen. It may take a while, but it's going to be given to us. However, if he does become an active writer, so if this actually gets made, he will do promotion. He will go on talk shows. He will give interviews. He will go to conventions. That means time not spent for Winds of Winter and, of course, spring, if that will ever happen. And I've tried to stay away from the hate videos. I mean, if you know the history of this channel, I actually started off very pro-George. It was very George-centric, but I drifted into other subjects. I want to get back to George. I want to get back to Stephen King. I want to get back to the books and stories, as well as the adaptations in TV and film. Any news on this TV show, I get some viewers and subscribers. But I got to be brutally honest. I think at this point, any time spent away, even a small amount of time as producer or writer, for Duncan Egg is less time for the books, for the main series. And I've been sort of back and forth on whether he has a right as a writer to do whatever he pleases. I'd have to say it is what it is. They're going to produce it. He will be an executive producer. That means he doesn't do very much, but he will do some things for it. Okay, that's the way it is. But him being a writer actively, I don't think is a good idea. I just think that would be a poor decision if he does go through with it and starts producing scripts for this thing, because he does like these stories. He's on the record. He really likes the Duncan Egg series. I think that's just going to cause a needless firestorm, but that's my humble opinion. So I'm somewhat interested in these stories, at least for some of the characters, but I'm sort of indifferent. I don't really care if it doesn't happen. So if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to be crying about it. But if it does happen, I'm excited for the other fans, because it does have a fan base. But I'm a little worried that this is, yes, taking time away from the books, and that is what the fans want at the moment. And I think it's getting frustrating at this point, waiting and waiting, and now this thing happens. But that's